leading by the Design Fellows Program here at CCA. I'm also the Associate Chair of our MBA in Design Strategy Program, so I kind of wear two hats, sometimes simultaneously, which does make things difficult, but tonight it's all fellows all the time. As intended, we had hoped to have Nathan Shedroff here, who's founder and chair of the MBA Design Strategy Program here at CCA. But unfortunately, he had a conflict and so can't make it this evening. Elizabeth Glenwinkle, who is the co-faculty lead for the Fellows Program, will be here in a little bit, so you'll get to hear from her. We also have 3 alums from the program. Dory Cole, to my right, Michelle Ronson straight ahead, and Dan Ryder in the back. Dory and Michelle were in cohort 1, the Pioneer cohort, and Dan just finished about a month and a half ago. So he's fresh off the experience. We're also joined by the ever wonderful Tim Smith, who is my co-associate chair for the DMBA program and longtime sustainability expert, advises in the Fellows Program and teaches the business models course and the operations course in the DMBA program. And then we have all of you who have come here out of what I hope is curiosity and interest, keen or otherwise. And what I'd like to do in terms of that, because I really do want to hear what the conversations were around the table, I want to do something fun. And if you'll bear with me, there is paper, and I'm being sustainable by recycling paper. So you can write on this side, or you can try and answer the questions on this side, but I don't think they'll have any relevance to you. And I'd like you to put down, fold it in half, actually. This is a little making project. So if you could fold it in half this way. And because sometimes I'm good at names and sometimes I'm not.
Because we make mistakes.
So what I'd like you to do, and I put crayons out to make this more fun. And Meredith needs a piece of paper. There's Meredith. And Caleb needs a piece of paper. So we have another one here. This is how I practice names. So what I'd like you to do is on one side, put your name, and on the other side, I want you to put one word that describes either how you're feeling right now or what brought you to be here tonight. What was the thing about the invite that said, oh, I want to check this out? Okay? So, name on one side, one word on the other side. Feel free to decorate. Do you want a different color? Do you want green? I'll take a green. You want a green? Okay, I'm sure we'll do that. Okay. Don't overthink. Don't overthink.
Hopefully the name isn't the hard part.
And write it big, so we can see it. Be bold. I want you to be bold, please.
I didn't even see things already now.
Anybody need more colors? More colors. What color do you want? We've got more. I've got some blues. I've got some purples. I got bright red. Any more? Okay. All right. No, not yet. I'm going to ask you guys to share it. John, you're being a total designer. You're forgetting my middle-aged eyes.
Right. Here we go. you start. No grades yet.
Just take a quick creativity shifters going. That's a good idea. Who wants hummus and chips? We can put that on the table too. Do feel free to move around. We'll keep you sated. Okay, everybody ready? All right. Great. Now comes the sharing part. So, I'm going to start on my right, and I'm going to cheat because I know Claudia's name. But, would you introduce yourself and tell us your word?
I'm Claudia, and I'm energized. I'm learning all kinds of things right now, and I'm integrating a lot of different fields, like design systems, marketing, graphics, and things like that. So I'm happy to be here. Very nice to be here.
Great. Hello. Welcome. You're not interrupting. We've got Elizabeth. You want to leave it back? We've got food and drink, and let's see. There's I think a seat at the table. And you know Michelle, so that's good.
I just thought he was cute.
I'm not telling Tony. Well, thank you. So you're energized and interested in what's next. Or is that just?
I think I'll dive in first, and you guys can jump in and see what your experience is. I think that Susan and I have been, that's been my role as one of the advisors, and students naturally gravitate to work together.
Oh,
So, it's kind of like, and it's very natural, Susan's the right, because we're very different, and so Susan's the right person for me, or Elizabeth's the right person for me. I would say the strongest support, though, comes from the group. So I think in every cohort, there's 2 different cohorts represented, that the group has bonded and really and you guys have been the support system for each other and giving feedback on projects and things like that. So that's been you as a student, you decide, where do you want that support. So it's not a formal relationship. It's much more that we're always here to provide that help, and then you kind of decide how you want to use it, but the group itself is what really steps in. You guys agree with that?
Yeah, and it's definitely not a super consistent relationship. Like if you need to expand the group of experts to dive into a particular topic, they're really good point people at connecting you with those other people. And there'll be down times where you'll just be churning on something in between your residencies, and then you'll think you have it figured out, and you come in and pitch it, and you just get a tremendous amount of feedback, and you have a lot to go sort of back to the drawing board with.
We also, when people need it or want it, and everybody in the cohort does this, but Elizabeth and I have taken great pains to do it. We'll direct people to resources. So if there's somebody whose brain we think you should pick, or an article you should read, or a book you should pick up, or something that you should check out, we'll point you in that direction.
I would also just reiterate that the time between residencies is by no means downtime. As a matter of fact, it's much more intense, I think. Whether it was going to those resources that Elizabeth and Susan referred us to, or Nathan, or Tim, or anyone, or hanging out with people in the cohort itself. A bunch of us met regularly, and we were on the phone, we were chatting in coffee shops. So it's a pretty continuous experience, actually, and coming together kind of almost so that caps off the time in between. You share your information, you get information, and you go off and do it again.
My question actually kind of dovetails with that, which is just kind of the time commitment. Obviously there's the kind of weekend sessions, but sort of just for planning, if you have families and jobs and whatnot, what sort of time do people in it?
probably best from you guys, but I would say that it depends. Totally, and we've had people with, we had a woman last year who had 2 little kids and 1 on the way, and had her baby between residency 5 and 6. She was very efficient. And she showed up at every residency, and and she had a full-time job as a city attorney in the city of Oakland. So I mean, and there are people who are incredibly busy, jobs, and try to be incredibly efficient. I think in those that little bit of downtime they have. So it really depends on the person. What would you guys say? Definitely what you put in, you will get out.
Right, of course.
And there's never enough time, so let's just be clear, right? We give you way too much work, and there's never enough time, and that's the nature of really challenging design problems. I think is you can never, ever, my favorite quote is, art is never finished, it's only abandoned. And I think with this project work, when you're trying to lead change, you never have enough time, you never have enough resources, you never have enough people, so that'll be the nature of the beast. I don't think anyone's ever satisfied, like, yeah, I had tons of time, that was awesome.
Well, and what we've often observed is that busy people often are able to produce more than people who have copious amounts of time, because you get fooled into thinking, I've got all this time, and you kind of drifted. You kind of go, oh shit. So there's particularly for people who are over the age of 30 or over the age of 35 and who have commitments beyond just school. You don't do a program like this lightly, right? You're taking this on. This is serious stuff. And so the reality is that if you're that committed to doing it and disrupting your life in that way, you're going to make adjustments so that you can do the work.
I'd like to add 2 things. A lot of people in my cohort used their project time to better their business, to change their skill set, to improve or add a discipline to their portfolio. So it had a much greater meaning than what was in front of them. They knew that once they completed this, it would take them to a higher level or introduce them into a new field. So that is a huge driver, right? Because it's not about it's not necessarily about I'm going to show up because I have this homework to do. It's more about here's a time and a framework and a structure that will help me achieve X, Y, Z because this is my greater goal. And you may or may not know what that goal is. I didn't. I knew it was this amorphous thing out there, and I didn't know what the name was, but it was going to be on a Post-it note, probably somewhere. Two things, at least for me, and then I know for my colleagues who I'm still very close with today, this is 4 years out. It afforded me the time, the discipline, and the structure to focus on something I never would have otherwise. 2 days a month, or 13 days total, like in the scheme of things, doesn't sound like a lot, but that's an enormous amount of time to invest in yourself. So just shut the cell phone off and like you're in a room and everybody knows not to bug you. You're, like that in and of itself will give you the runway to make the exploration. I'm not going to say the change because it's up to you what you do with it. But then also the discipline and the structure. It's like a giant timeout for you to focus on. Is that?
You need to time out. It is open space, and to Michelle's point, not everybody who goes into the program, who comes into the program, leaves and designs a whole different career for themselves. Lots of people do, because the dirty little secret about this program is that, we talk about business transformation, social innovation, but personal transformation. You don't go huge. You don't go through a program like this and come out the other end the same way as you started. Dan started the program in one way, and
I'm like right in the middle of it. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to start it quickly. I was laid off 4 days after our first residency ended, and I was already planning on my own trajectory out of the firm, but I thought it would not happen to the end of the year. But it was great, and, I mean, except for the fact that I'm penniless, it was a really fortuitous event, because it allowed me to put on my critical thinking hat full time. So it was kind of a timeout, Rachel, but it's sort of an intense timeout. And you're using the experience here to bring all of your experiences together, all of your past experiences, and your present learning experience, and then the possibilities of the future. They're all being mishmashed together, and you're sorting things out and making sense of things in a new way. And I'm in the middle of that process still. I'm in a place now that I would never have ever been at, just like you were saying, Michelle. I would never have been at this place had I not gone through this process. It just wouldn't have happened. So for that reason, it's...
Can any of you be more specific about that, actually? Like,
We're all in pornography now.
I didn't know that he was posted.
Specific in what way?
well, what in taking it like that? So then, what happens? So, Dan, you were in something, and now you're sort of morphing.
I think can I just say that what I hear is I see the transformation of being able to present yourself and your work and what you care about in a much more confident way, in a much more strategic way, in a much more thoughtful way. There's a feeling of accomplishment. There's a feeling of having a whole new network of people who are there to support you and believe in you. So I think I see that happen. And the transformation is different for different people. It happens sometimes after the program's over. Sometimes it happens the night before the final presentation in the 6th residency, and you see their presentation and you're just like, oh, where did that come from? Because I haven't seen it that much, but all of a sudden here it is. Sometimes people come in and they've got it dialed in from the day one. They're just, it's very different from every person. But I think the outcome of, again, feeling more confident, being able to talk about what you care about, what you want to do, in a way that gets other people excited who know nothing about you or your program. I've heard so many people who go into new job interviews and they'll show their project that they did here, which has nothing to do with the job that they're applying for at times. And they're saying, oh, I totally blew them away because I could talk about this work, and it just gave a whole new dimension to who I was.
But to be more specific, so on that's kind of on the qualitative side. On the real specifics of what do people do as a result. Some people, as I say,
Is that your question? Do you want to know what we did and what we do now?
It was really a combination of both. It was the question was inherent. It was a little bit about personal and then the product.
So some people have switched careers. Michelle,
I did a wholesale switch. I was a senior vice president and creative director for Wells Fargo. And before that, senior vice president and creative director for Bank of America. And before that, senior vice president and creative director for Nordstrom. So after 18 years leading and building 6 teams for Fortune 5 countries, did I just say countries?
Their ownership structure in countries.
I left it and went up on my own, and I'm a one-man show. I'm used to running 20 to 50-person teams. And it was scary, and it was exciting, and I love it, and I have, without sounding overconfident, I have supreme confidence in what projects I'm interested in, when I'm not interested, and who I want to work with. And that in and of itself, I believe I've never met with a client that wants to work with me or that I want to work with that didn't want to work with me. It taught me a skill set, it taught me a new skill set, it taught me how to deliver information in different ways, it taught me how to identify very quickly if someone is a visual thinker versus an analytical thinker versus a storytelling thinker, and how to communicate with that person on their level instantly so that I can frame proposals for them and frame presentations for them. It taught me how to how to question people in a nice way, or business models, and I consult on business strategies and for a lot of entrepreneurs and startups and small design firms. And it really instilled, I'm going to say more than a confidence, it instilled an empowerment and a vocabulary in order for me to not only go out and do this, but to be very successful in doing it. And it gave me a network of people that is unsurpassed, that I interact with. Tori and I just had dinner. Elizabeth and I will go out on Monday night. But it's a transformational process that for me and the people that I went through it with, it's incredibly bonding also. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's great.
Dory, you had
So
a
I
really
was at the kind of a halfway point of a past life, starting into my second half, and I arrived in San Francisco after raising 4 kids, and I was a designer. My background was in graphic design, but then I started at school, so I had already transferred designing things to design thinking. But I had language that was design-based or kind of life wisdom, and that didn't really work that well in the marketplace. So I came thinking that I needed a new language, I needed relevance, and was I like able to be a player in the world? And so, or was I too old? And so what I found is I was in a unique situation because I did this full time. So I really put a lot of time into it, and it made me think about where my life was and what I really wanted to do. So my project really kind of went into the future. And it's completely impacted it gave me a whole new language that was relevant. And now I'm leading change in lots of different, in the nonprofit sector. I'm part of the founding team of Hub Oakland, which I remember we just learned about Hub when we were in our program. It had just moved to San Francisco. It was like this cool idea. And I'm also part of a movement of social investing, moving money, which I was never into money, moving money from unsustainable things into this new world and these new projects that are sustainable. So my 22-year-old son told me the other night, he said, "Mom, when you first got here, you had so much passion and you were so excited, but you made no sense at all." And he said, "Now you make really good sense. You're doing such interesting things." So what I learned was that all the intuition and all the wisdom of my life was exactly what we were talking about. So it wasn't like I was irrelevant. It was just a language that worked in the marketplace.
So more specifically, some people change jobs. They go, "Oh my God, I needed this program to realize why I was unhappy at work. I'm going to go look for something new." And with newfound confidence, with new skills, went off and started working for a different kind of company. We had somebody who was working for Walmart.com in their e-commerce division, and made a switch in about 4 months after the program first ended, and is now, 3 years later, working for Facebook, right? Yeah. Working at Facebook. So she sort of moved from Walmart.com, major corporation, to social media startup in a much more senior position. And she had used all of her, even though she was very creative, it was really this notion that she had significantly increased her skills as a leader, led differently, and also had a kind of design approach to everything that she was doing.
And she's in sales.
And
she doesn't push pixels. She knows nothing about a serif.
Right. No, she's in sales. Other people have started businesses. They came in with a project that they really wanted to work on with the intent of making it a business, and they have. Other people, we had a film maker do the program. Very little business background. Definitely an auteur, a prize-winning filmmaker. He had an idea for using direct mail to shift conversations about climate change and change behaviors. And he started working on that and refined it, but he then found a project that he could do in a smaller way and got that off the ground, working with schools and doing a whole fundraising campaign for schools with a product that he designed. And he ended up with 2 projects. And now he's working with Van Jones, making films for Van Jones's work, and basically working on new policies and campaigns. Other people stayed exactly where they were, in the exact job that they had when they came into the program, but are doing it better. One person came into the program and within the first month started applying some of the tools that she was learning in the program, completely transformed how she worked with her team, and they were approaching their big annual fundraising event as a result of bringing these tools that she had learned, applying them, shifting the way that she worked with the team, shifting the way the team worked together. They had their most successful fundraiser ever. So what you do with what you get here is entirely up to you. And we often tell people that you can use the program to design what's next for yourself. And for the most part, the thing is that regardless of where people put the locus of their focus, it's really about themselves. And you're figuring out how you're designing what's next for yourself, whether you're doing it intentionally or not. Sure.
Following up with what you said that you're designing it for yourself, I'm curious about the environment. I've found that there are 2 types of creative courses. There's some with the community is very nurturing. It's like, oh, you're doing great and everything you're doing is beautiful, even if it's not. And like people just like encourage you and tell you like keep going. And then there's a type of creative environment where people really put questions and challenge you and say like, well, I don't know about this, and like they push you by critiquing. So on that spectrum, from everything flies to the very difficult one, where would you put the community in this program?
So the diversity of the cohort is extraordinary. So in our cohort, we had an economist, we had a filmmaker, we had someone at Revolution Foods, we had the Walmart person, we had a designer from IDEO, we had, and the brain trust in that room will not let you get away with it. So there might be like oh, that's nice. However, in our experience, you were such powerful, smart people that there isn't a lot of hair brushing, and that's good. And when you're between residencies and you throw something out there into the ether for feedback, you're going to get it. So it's almost important that you actually have some thick skin going into this. Because you're going to come out with much thicker skin, but much more real-world. I would say overall it's very nurturing. I would say that and I'm the bad guy for this one, is that every residency we have you present your work and get critique, get feedback. So and that's the design process, right? You always put your work out there and you're always getting feedback. And we invite guest critics in, and sometimes the guest critics can be very tough. And it can be a little shocking of like, whoa, where did that guy come from? All of a sudden, what happened to nurturing, But, we want you to, that one of the goals of this project is for you to become a much better presenter of what you care about and your thinking. And your thinking is on display. And so that's an iterative prototyping your message and your thinking and your work process of presenting and getting that kind of critical feedback.
Let me also add something that we're encouraged to trip up and make mistakes. There's no right. It's a constructive critiquing. It's not like architecture school. They will not. We're not going to be a flamethrower. Not going to hit us. I, for instance, made a right turn in my 5th residency. At the end of my 5th residency, I completely changed my project to reflect where I was going. And I decided to end up taking it back from the beginning, and at our final presentation, I was only about halfway. I basically was 3 months behind everyone else. I didn't care. Because what was most important was to follow through the nature of the program, which is to be authentic and to do what's real and what makes sense and what follows through with the true process. And there was no problem with that at all. So.
And you ended up with a great idea.
You did.
Yeah.
It was a good
You ended
pivot.
up with, you've ended up with a great project that you're carrying forward.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that project I think has traction.
The other thing about this nature, oh, I'm sorry, Charles.
Well, there's just adding one other sort of like case in point to that is we were in our, I think it was maybe our 2nd residency, and we had one of the design directors from Nokia Advanced Design Group down in South Bay who had taken the program for, and he's in there as a critic for our presentations, and he's watching an individual sort of present, and he waits till the end, very politely cites, he's like, the way that you're positioning things on the slides actually looks like it's coming from more of a print media background, and like the amount of content per slide is not appropriate for the situation that we're in. It looks more like, and it turns out that the guy that was presenting was actually a print graphic designer for the last like 30 years, 25 years. And so the bite of the criticism comes not from, like whether it's harsh criticism or not, whether it bites is whether it's pertinent to what you're doing. And that's where, when you have such a really diverting, like someone's like diving into, what it's like to, care for the elderly in different stages of like ability levels, and then someone else is looking at how to, prenatal, not postnatal, what was
prenatal vitamins.
Prenatal vitamins,
Pre-prenatal
through like skin care and like that. And it's like the projects are super diverse, and you're not expecting someone to come in and be an expert on what you do. And there's someone in the room who's like, actually, I handled distribution for some pharmaceutical company that tried to do this 3 times and they didn't, And that's where the sort of the relevance of it makes the criticism, I would say, more palatable than like art school criticism in general, but less. It's very infrequent that you felt like, everyone was patting each other on the back, without saying something like, this is great, except for part slide 2, it's a very specific thing which didn't add the logic of your overall composition.
I think the other thing about that, thank you for that, Charlie. I think the other thing about all of this nature of do we just, is everybody, we don't operate on the basis of entitlement. It's that, yes, everybody wins, everybody participates. But you don't do a program like this because you simply want to get stroked. The assumption is that you're coming into a program like this because you want to do something different, because you want to learn something new, that you're not that you're not an expert. And one of the things is that we all learn all the time. This is about this is a practice. It's about getting better at the stuff we do. It's about finding out where our weaknesses are and how we can shore them up. It's about learning new skills, and anytime you're learning new skills or learning something new, you're probably going to be awkward at it. Fault tolerant. This is a completely open space to explore. It's a completely open space to fail. You're not going to lose your job. You're not going to, no one's going to fire you if something gets screwed up. And it's not that you screw up, it's that something screws up, right? So part of the nature of the critique is that if there is a presentation there, you're critiquing the work, you're not attacking the person, right? It's not, the presentation or the work isn't you, it's what you produce. And the desire is The desire is for us, as the keepers of the space, is to ensure that no one leaves the program worse off than when they started, or simply the same as when they started. The idea is to accelerate your ability to do good and better, to do the stuff that you want to do. So therefore, it's incumbent on us not to simply go, oh, isn't that lovely? And then not say anything, right? We want to, to Charlie's point, that really is lovely, but had you thought about just doing something over there? It's the little tweaks, and that everybody does this for everybody else. Right?
And there's such different perspectives in the room that the economist is going to see something that the designer is not. And the nonprofit person and the policy person is going to see something that the economist doesn't. And the writer in the group is going to be like, oh, we're everybody shit. But that's one of the great things too about you're presenting every week, but you're, first of all, it's like your cohort, you're only as strong as your cohort, right? So if you have a really strong cohort, it's like, it's familial at this point, and you learn each other's skills, and then you go to the policy person, and then you go to the economics person and say, I'm having trouble with this, does this make sense? And they sit down with you and they say, no, have you thought about it this way? And by the way, I don't know what a typeface is. Can you help me lay this stuff? And you learn how other people think and their skills, and like together there's like this group elevation.
It's the collaboration. And that's the thing, is that we believe that one of the key skills for operating today and in the future, whether you're in a nonprofit world or a traditional business world, or you're designing for people, that the key really to organizational success, to business success, is the ability to collaborate across disciplines. That we're not going to solve the kinds of problems that we have in the world or make the kinds of shifts that we want to make in the world if everybody stays in a silo. If it's just all designers around the table or just all lawyers around the table. So we call for, through the applicants, purposely to set up a diverse cohort. So there is this cross-discipline, multidiscipline presence. And in that, people work collaboratively to create for themselves and for the group and for whatever they're trying to do. And they learn from one another across this multitude of perspectives. Because this is what's needed in the world. And our job is, if you're coming into this program and you're coming in and you're saying, yeah, sign me up, I'm ready to design, make, and lead change, it's incumbent on us to help you do that, to make you more effective storytellers, because effective leaders are effective storytellers. It's incumbent on us to hold a space where you can work across disciplines, work collaboratively, get both atta-girls and atta-boys for your achievements and your accomplishments, and also be pushed to go beyond what you thought was possible, to get out of comfort zones. Yeah?
Have you had any cross-disciplinary teams from a single company come through the program?
No, but we welcome that.
That's a great question.
It's a great question.
It's a great environment.
Because that's one of my hopes is that an engineer, software application developer, art director from the same company.
Okay, we're talking afterwards. We definitely, we haven't had that, and we very much welcome it.
We did have a lead strategist from Nokia and a lead designer from Nokia.
Yeah.
And they didn't collaborate on the project, but it was definitely eye-opening for each of them to see each other's, basic description of their approach.
Right.
And since one of them was looking internally at some of the functional elements of the company, there was a lot of interesting, they would just take a sidebar and discuss things. I'm going to do some changes. So
Yeah, same thing happened with a team from Swisscom. We had two people from Swisscom, and they were coming from very different parts of the company.
Yeah, one was the VP of innovation for a satellite office here, and the other one was the head of HR. But not quite as diverse.
I would say that within a residency, we have a lot of exercises that we put people in teams, and then we split them up and put them in different teams so that everyone gets to work with each other on sometimes very fun, workshop activities, sometimes more challenging ones. And I think the other thing that's interesting is that, and I think this will stay the same, which is that I would say at the beginning of the program, the first few residencies, it's more heavy on lectures. Still some interaction and workshop activities, but more heavy on lectures. And then as the program starts to go this way, go towards residency 6, so more group work. You have to work more in groups on your projects and get feedback from each other. That starts to ramp up that way. So the lectures start to go down, and the group work and the collaboration internally starts to ramp up.
Are you working on your same project over the course of the 6 months, and then you talk about these critiques, there's different iterations or progress?
We track the design process. So you start out with the, what is, right? So what, if I've figured out a domain, so for example, Wayne Pan and Jim Pitt did the diabetic project. Jim Pitt actually thought she was coming in. She's the nonprofit, head of communications for Tipping Point, which is a nonprofit. She didn't think she was going to work on this at all, but she was so inspired because of her father having diabetes that she partnered up with Wayne. So they started off with the design process of doing primary and secondary research. So the first few residencies, that's what their projects were about, like what they learned. Then it was starting to frame the possibilities, like what kind of different solutions. And so that was what the presentations in the middle of the program were about, like what different directions we could go. Then she and Wayne started getting into prototyping of trying different things. So boot camp was one possibility, an app, they explored different things. And then the final part of the residency was getting a business case together, just like what would we charge, how many people would we need, where would we get resources, how would we fund this. And they actually got as far, not everybody gets this far, they got as far as actually running a short example boot camp and getting some patients that Wayne had access to try out some of the ideas. So they got really, really far with their project. So every time they presented, they were at a different stage in their project, and they were presenting on that.
So I think that, I don't know about folks here, but I assume that sometimes people also are trying to compare and contrast this with other programs from other institutions. What would you say to folks who are considering other options? What is this particularly unique that they should consider versus other ones?
It probably would help to know who you're You can talk a little bit since you teach.
I teach at the Academy of Art in the graduate school. I looked at the Presidio School. I looked at the Stanford D School. I didn't know what I was looking for, to be very honest, but I knew that the landscape was changing. I knew that I was curious about what that change was. Many of you, my word would have been curious. And I knew that I wasn't as passionate about my work anymore. So it wasn't like I'm looking to build design thinking or qualitative research skills. I didn't have that. I was looking for a program structure and a framework. So the Presidio School to me was too environmental. There isn't a visual design component to it. The Stanford D School requires GMATs, and going through that whole thing would have delayed me a year or two. The DMBA program here for me was just too junior, and it was also a 2-year full-time commitment, and I wasn't. I mean, I needed like a swift kick in the ass with some framework. So those were some of the things I looked at. The most interesting program to me was actually where Elizabeth went, which was the Illinois Institute of Technology, which is in Chicago, which is not geographically desirable. But they also have this like 3-month in China thing, and
yeah, it's amazing program. I would say one thing is the time commitment.
Yeah.
Susan and I are always a little taken aback when we see these programs that are a week and cost the same amount of money. To me, that's a networking. That's really, you're being exposed to some tools. Whether you could actually go into your office and use them the next day, I cannot imagine, but it's possible. That's you're paying that money to network with people that you think, and network, and believe me, I loved going to graduate school and Institute of Design. The strongest thing you can get out of that is a network, absolutely, key reason. So if you don't have the 6-month time commitment, I can understand that, but I think the fact that you meet for 2 very intensive days, you have a month in between to stay in touch with people, struggle with Moodle, commiserate with your colleague, your cohort, work with them, meet up with them, and then come back and see how the progress you've made. You actually get really far, really fast in that amount of time. So when I see these 1-week and 2-week programs, I'm just thinking like, what actually, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, the other thing that we've heard, and obviously a 6-month program isn't going to be a substitute for a degree program. So if what you really want is a degree, this isn't that program. Most of the people who go into this program are looking for something deeper than a workshop, a 1-week or a 3-day experience. Don't feel that they need or may not even have the time and money to do a degree commitment, but they know that they want something substantive. Boot camps, 3-day boot camps in design or something like that, can be awesome. There, you get in, you have an intense experience, 3 days, you're exhilarated, oh my God, that's so great. And you go back Monday morning and you tell people what you've done, and then a week goes by, and 2 weeks go by, and 3 weeks go by, and you're trying to use the stuff that you learned, but you don't have a community to check in with. No one's checking in with you to see how are you doing.
You don't get to come back and say, I completely failed, and we say, okay, well, let's try. Well, what can we do different?
What can you do differently? And so it doesn't build on itself. And what we hear time and time again from people in the program is that, first it sounds like, oh my God, 6 months, but it goes really fast. And something that the ahas, this is something that we forget, right? We forget that we don't learn everything when we first hear it. We don't learn everything when we first hear it. We may not even learn it the second time or the third time we hear it. Or it may go, oh yeah, that's good. But 4 months later, you're doing something and you go, oh, now I get what they were talking about. Learning in itself is an iterative process. It takes time to cook. You have to, you'll take stuff in, you're changing, you're learning, your brain's, working in new ways. Some things just take time. And so being in the program gives you that time to reflect, to try something that failed, let's try something else, to learn new stuff, to start making these deeper connections. And you kind of go like this. It's this spiraling where you can actually build on what you're learning, figure out how to do something better, you get more practice, you get more support, so that by the time you leave, you've built a foundation, you've built a base. Now, will it always feel as exhilarating as 3-month bam? Well, not necessarily. There can be exhilarating moments, hard. But it gets hard, and you'll get in the weeds. And I guarantee you that this is like any design process. You go through it, and sort of like clockwork. And we do this in the DMBA program. It's about the 3rd or 4th month. People are working on their projects, and you're in the weeds. And it just is like, what the heck am I doing? That's part of the process, and it's really uncomfortable, and you feel stuck and icky, but you move through it, and this is where you get your big leaps in learning. And suddenly you springboard forward, or you do something like that, where you're working on a project, and 1 month before you're supposed to be done, you do a major pivot, And suddenly, it's clear what you want to do, you glom onto something, and it's, you know, the sun is shining, the birds are singing, and everything's good again in the world. So in terms of comparing this program to others, to, you know, I'm a product of the Presidio program. Tim and I were in the pioneer cohort of the Presidio exec program.
But I would have done this if it existed.
That's right. And I didn't know that I was going to invent this when I was in the Presidio program, because I thought the Presidio program was my ticket to my next career. Little did I imagine that my next career was going to be here, because full transparency, I had no design background, none whatsoever, no educational background other than having had degrees and gone to school, had no academic background whatsoever, and here I am. But it was because someone came in, that someone was Nathan Shedrock, who started talking about design, and I went, oh, yeah, that. And what I wanted to do and what I felt important was, because this was at a time when the DMBA program was just beginning to launch, and it was specifically for the next generation of business leaders, I said, you know what? Next generation is great, but what are we going to do about the current crop of business leaders? Because this next generation is going to come out, and if this is the current generation, and they don't know what these people are talking about, they're just going to knock their heads against the wall all the time. So we wanted to start moving people like you down the path so that when the next generation came, bam, you just double the acceleration. That's how this program came to be, and it's why we believe in part with its focus on this integration of design thinking, business, and sustainability, as opposed to just being on one or the other, not just on design thinking, not just on sustainability, not just on business leadership, but that integration of the three. This is what distinguishes us.
Can I also add one more thing? When I said earlier on about how I was characterizing the time between residencies as very intense, I just want you to take comfort in saying that what I meant by that is that actually you're integrating more than just those notions, Susan, but you're integrating your entire life, pretty much from the get-go. After you walk out of that first 3-day residency, you're already planning everything. You know, you're starting to think about how you're conducting yourself professionally outside of this classroom. So your exercise just filters into your daily life, and although you are now adding more stuff into your learning process, it feels very holistic. And I don't think the fear factor is really that present in terms of time management issues.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion.
There's definitely one of the drivers of that, I think specifically about this program, is that like there's no content to this program in terms of like subject matter. There's process that you're given, there's tool sets, there's experts, and any of the drills that you do in order to like understand a process that might have like, you know, like case study content in it, is just to like walk you through that once before you then walk through it with the thing that you're sort of caring about. In the beginning of the program, for those of you that don't bring something that you already have a trajectory on to the program, that can be really sort of hazy because it feels like you don't know exactly why you're here, because you need to figure out what the purpose is. But a lot of the initial like tools and sort of workshop stuff is centered around that sort of focusing and applying the design process to your finding like the area that you want to actually focus in. And it's from that point on, it's not about whether you've done any homework. It's not about whether you've completed something for this program. It's all about you're just like squeezing the program to get more relevant tools to do what you want to do on the ground. It's part of your daily life. So the integration element should happen naturally, unless you come in and for some reason just force yourself to do something you don't really care about. So don't do that.
Yeah.
But
the most successful projects, bar none, are the ones where you care. You have to care about something. And if you don't care about it, you shouldn't be doing it. So if you come into this program, you can simply care about the learning and then possibly work with someone else on a project if they've got an idea that is the locus of their focus. But care and commitment, care and commitment are actually traits of leaders. And to the extent that you're putting that and applying that to a project that you do in the program and being a fellow in this program, being part of the cohort, it's about care and commitment. And people will care and commit to you.
That's where you get the most criticism, actually, when you present, because people will know that you are presenting work that you don't care about. And it'll show up, and that's where you'll get the most criticism.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want to do, don't seem very invested in this. So
right.
You're going to be put on the spot pretty quickly about that.
So it seems like there's some other questions hovering around. I haven't heard them, but I see questions on people's faces.
One thing I want to bring up, if anybody's worried about the design aspect, if you don't have a design background, I found the group to be so unbelievably generous, and there were young people who like I would say, I don't know how to do a PowerPoint, and they would direct me to something, ask Linda, and I learned by myself, There was somebody who took us through the presenting. We broke into groups just on our own, and we met weekly. And somebody was so amazing that she was leading us, like how to do a presentation. So there was just this amazing generosity. And there was somebody from Mexico that was in our program who was temporarily living in the city, and she came over to my house for dinner all the time. And so everybody's just sharing, and so I wouldn't be nervous about that at all.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Edna? No. Okay.
Can I say what's resonating for me about
Sure.
what I've heard so far? Because there's quite a bit, and I'm really gobbling this up, It's kind of hard to sit here quietly. I think when you were talking about the long-term integration process, I think that's really huge. I mean, I think probably many of us have experienced that, and I think, these boot camp things are great, like you say, but there's no substitute for having yourself time to kind of let stuff ferment, try it out, think about it, bounce ideas around, come back, revisit it over a whole season like that. So I think that's really powerful, at least for me personally, I think that is. I think the idea of taking yourself out of your comfort zone in a safe setting is really huge, because it's really hard to do that anyways. And that's kind of like really where you're kind of getting on the frontiers of your own abilities and pushing yourself and learning new things. And again, doing that in a supportive atmosphere with a lot of people who do things that you don't do. I mean, most of us work in multidisciplinary teams, but we're probably so busy with our advocacy that we're not listening so well. And I think here this is an opportunity you can really kind of open up the doors wide and listen to your colleagues and see where they're coming from and empathize with them a little bit more. And so I think I really value that opportunity as well, because I never sit down and work with an economist. That would be really interesting to change of pace for me. And I guess to be brief, I guess the other thing is just the whole idea of cognitive dissonance as a professional is to get into a situation where there's stuff going on that doesn't yet make sense to you yet, but it's sort of almost just beyond your reach, and having an opportunity to work with a diverse bunch of people who can kind of help you sort of absorb this and become more comfortable. And again, that kind of gives you a chance to stretch and reach beyond. So those things are really, seem to me like really like huge opportunities.
The ability to swim in ambiguity is it's actually a really helpful thing to be able to do. And it will just tease out the perfectionist in all of you and just annoy it.
And for people who are structured thinkers or linear, like engineers for your company, working in ambiguity can be really, really, really challenging. but because they want, the engineers are, and oftentimes linear thinkers are really wired to jump to solution. Here's a problem, I gotta find a fix. And in this, it's the open field of, okay, that might be a good solution, but there might be a better one down the road. And so not jumping to solution immediately is kind of a hallmark of what goes on in this program, and it can challenge people because the future is unknown, right? And if we're trying to create the future or design a future, we're necessarily designing for something that doesn't exist yet and it's not known. And it's that working in that unknown, invisible space that can be really freeing for some people because it's not known and nothing's fixed and everything is possible. And it can be really, 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 really uncomfortable for other people who always want a fix. They need to know what's going on and what's the structure. We will provide both while encouraging people to get comfortable with ambiguity. Because the fact is that the world is a really ambiguous place right now, and shift happens. And
So I had the opposite with that after being comfortable in the computer space for my entire career. One of the biggest takeaways that I yielded from this program was actually shifting my entire process to research-driven solutions. And I built tremendous qualitative skills and primary and secondary research skills that actually changed how I approach my work and the clients that I seek and the type of work that results from it. So I think it goes both ways. If you're comfortable with ambiguity, this will provide you or expose you to a totally different way to approach it, and hopefully if you're into it and open to it, it's incredibly humbling too. So everybody has these big, fat titles that walks into the room or has done like something, they're published on the cover of this and that. When you walk into that room, like, no one cares. and it doesn't matter anymore, because what matters is your participation and your contribution to yourself and your projects in the room. So it took me from a place where I was probably way too comfortable in ambiguity to this other. So
I would also say one real quick thing, if that's possible. The fact that a lot of you use the word curious is really great, because Michelle and I were talking the other day about hiring who we look for, and I look for curiosity in people, and if they're not curious, that's, to me, is a very bad sign. I think, so when you come in with curiosity, it's great. I think the other thing that the program throws, and some people are really good at this, and some people struggle, is improv. Being able to just, we're doing this right now, we're presenting this, or I'm talking about this, or I'm presenting myself as an expert on that. So that ability to be comfortable, so beyond ambiguity, not just, oh, I'm comfortable with being ambiguous, okay, now stand up and present. Now stand up and talk about it. That improv skill is something that I look for in people, and I think that's something that we work on in the program, which is really powerful.
and the disparate point of views helps you present to different audiences better. So if you're presenting to a group of scientists, you would present in a very different way than if you present to a group of children's book illustrators, if you present to it. And it helps you laser that in, because you have all those people around the table, and you can tell the consistent questions, in the feedback that are coming from the different mind maps that are. Does that make sense?
What time is it? Midnight. So I know that Susan is always available to answer questions. I'm available as well. And she's also always very good about connecting you with someone from a past cohort. So it might be one of these fabulous people who took time out of their Tuesday night, which is awesome. But it also might be, oh, I really want to talk to that economist, or I really want to talk to that filmmaker, and ask them what they got out of the program. So I think we're always happy to make those connections. And everyone's always very generous with their time, of like, I'm sure I'd be happy to talk to an interested potential candidate. So
if anyone wants to talk to any of us, just come up afterwards and we'll give you emails. We're happy to share.
And yeah, always happy to answer lots of questions. Thank you for coming.
One thing that I neglected to mention, a detail, applications. We are accepting applications now. We'll be starting early admissions into the program after January 5th. All the details about how to apply are on the website. No worries, there are no tests you have to take. We don't want to know how you are at test taking. We have no interest in that. What we are interested in is your interest and your thoughts and your ideas. It's $12,000, which includes all books, materials, meals, field trips, everything. But if you get your application in by March 1st, you get a $500 discount, so it's $11,500. And I'm happy to meet with any one of you individually or in smaller groups to talk more about your interest in the program and how it might suit your needs. We'll also be doing another info session January 16th. If you want to come again and still check it out or tell other people about it, we often find that people love going through the program with a friend, but you will find new friends in the program. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.